Good evening, everybody. It is 8 o'clock on the East Coast. It's 7 o'clock Central Time here in Minnesota from the shores of Roberts Lake in Faribault, just south of the Twin Cities. It's a Thursday night episode. Thank you all for your patience. Some life events came up on Tuesday night, which couldn't be avoided and required me to drive from Minnesota to Kentucky and back, which is no short jaunt. So anyhow, I had to reschedule the show. Again, thank you so much for your patience. This is also the last show that'll be sort of on the fly. I'm on a hotspot. I don't even have Wi-Fi here, so I'm on cell phone coverage. So I want to get the guests on as soon as possible so that if I cut out, we're still going to have great content from our guests tonight. I have, those of y'all that don't know, I've relocated to Minnesota, and I close on my new house tomorrow. So living like a vagabond, a nice vagabond. This is good living, I got to admit. But that comes to an end tomorrow and back to reality tomorrow. And so thank you all for being here. I know that there's other podcasts on and there's other time slots, and I don't want to intrude on that, but I thought it was an important enough show that it warranted not canceling the episode tonight. We had the president of USARK Florida, Elizabeth Wisneski, as well as Daniel Parker. You guys have seen Daniel as the face of USARK Florida, and I have to, he's listening, but I have to apologize. I don't know the official title, but I would say Director of Communications, something along those lines. So we got an update on the USARK Florida lawsuit this week, and we're going to deep dive on that. You guys, if you've watched the show, you know that I like to pick apart a very specific topic, stay on topic, and really deliver that content in that matter. So we're going to go right to the source, USARK Florida. I'm thankful to have them on the show, and I'm proud in a lot of ways because I know that they're entrusting me with the message and the platform that represents what their values are as well, and our values as an industry. So what we're going to do tonight is a little bit different. I'm going to go and make the announcements. I'm going to get the sponsorships out of the way, and then we're going to jump right in with Daniel and Elizabeth and go straight on for 60, 90 minutes tonight for the show. So thank you all for being here. And I see some of you all in the audience. I did my morning show, Proper Cup of Joe, this morning, and you guys got to see the sunrise. Because when Daniel tuned into the green room, he goes, "Where are you? It's still light out there." Yeah, well, when I did my morning show this morning, it was dark and the sun came up. So we'll get to see the sun go down behind me tonight. It's been a weird week. Here we are. I'm glad to have everybody here. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. So some real quick announcements. Like I said, I close on the new house tomorrow. I'll be back in a new studio in the home for next week's Tuesday show. I'll be running. I think, who knows, this could change, but I think I'm just going to do a solo show on Tuesday night. I'll catch everybody up. There's been a lot to process of getting the snakes up here, starting a new business up here, continuing the life I started in Florida up here, blah, blah, blah. We'll get into all that on Tuesday night. Some very special people that made it possible. Justin at Pressure Pythons. If y'all haven't checked out Pressure Pythons, please check out Justin and Alex at Pressure Pythons. They're out of Jacksonville, Florida. They have babysat and incubated 4 clutches for me, and they've been fantastic caretakers. Got a new clutch tonight actually with them. We cut one. They cut one. I watched on video. We'll talk more about that Tuesday. But huge thanks to Justin and Alex at Pressure Pythons. Check them out. Give them support on Instagram if you don't mind. Chakra Scales, that's Danny and Taylor. They let me move my collection from Florida to Minnesota to their farmhouse in a separate area from their collection. They set up a quarantine area. My whole collection's there. They have really, really hooked it up. So big news, big stuff coming up with Chakra Scales, Danny and Taylor. And then lots of people to thank, but most specifically also Shannon at Green Dragon Brokers. He has a clutch from a female from a breeding partnership that just laid. So he's got those eggs. That's a shared clutch. That's our clutch together. He's got those down in Orlando. So check out all those people. I'll get more in depth on some more people I have to thank, but I literally couldn't have made this move without them. And tomorrow is the realization of everything we've been planning and working towards. So I'm excited for that. Next Sunday, the 24th, I will be in Davenport, Iowa at the Show Me Snakes show. After that, I'll be in Tinley at the REDLINE shipping booth. I'll be broadcasting Proper Royals live from that booth, and I hope I'm going to figure it out. Lessons learned in Daytona with Daniel and Elizabeth. I'm going to do it a little bit better this time and make sure that the internet and the hot spots and all that are hooked up, ready to go. So tune in, Tinley live on Proper Royals YouTube channel, this channel right here. Go to my LinkTree. It's in the link down below. I do this as a business. I do this for revenue streams. There's lots of ways to support me. Check out the LinkTree link down below. There's Patreon. There's my Morph Market. There's my email. If you want a monthly list of what I have available, I will put on Facebook. There's a link there. You'll get to see what shows I'm vending at, all that sort of thing. And I can't wait to jump into the Midwest market. And let's give some thanks, pay some bills. I already mentioned REDLINE shipping. You'll see their logo and information, but it is all down in the information down below as well in the description. REDLINE shipping, I think you're going to love shipping your live animals with them. Great prices, great customer service, and they now have a points program where you can earn discounts of your own. Every time you ship with them, you'll earn credit towards a free shipping or discounted shipping label in the future. Use the promo code PROPER10 to get, that's a lie, Proper5. Use the promo code Proper5 to get $5 off your next shipping label. You're going to enjoy it. Come check us out at the Tinley booth. I'll be there at the REDLINE shipping booth at Tinley, right in the front lobby when you first walk in. I like to feed frozen thawed rodents to my animals. Check out Cold Blooded Cafe. They're the only frozen rodents that I use. I've been extremely pleased with their quality and their product. I was a customer before I ever got into business with them as far as supporting the show and sponsorship. Use promo code PROPER10. They're going to give you 10% off of your order. That's a lot of jack on a full box of rodents, guys. Go check that out. Give them the support. You're going to be happy with the product that you get. B and S Reptilia. If you're interested in ball pythons, sure, everybody loves ball pythons. I love ball pythons. But Chris has a little bit of everything. His own personal goal is to buy a new species to breed every year. So he's got Morelia. He's got colubrids. He has boas, locality boas. He has snakes that I don't even know what they are. You got to go check out Chris at B and S Reptilia. It's right there in the name. It's not ball pythons. It's not one specific breed. It's Reptilia. It's across the board. Go check him out. He's also the Pennsylvania distributor for the Chipper. Go check them out. We got Keith out of Kreative Genetics out in California, a good friend, also somebody I did business with and was a customer of. I've got one of his ball pythons. That is an Axanthic het clown that I will be breeding this year, so I definitely am familiar with his product. He is dealing in genes like the Stranger, VPI Axanthics, clowns, pieds, and he enjoys a small collection but high-end animals. He has hatchlings available right now. That's Kreative Genetics. Again, Instagram, and you can check him out in the description below. Last but not least, I got to say thanks. This is the farewell sponsorship. Until the next time that Jeremy and Holly at Snakes for the Memories. What good friends, what great people. Also relocated to the Midwest. They're over in Indiana, which is a far drive from Minnesota, but still part of the Midwest. Go check them out. Dealing in highway projects. They just cut a new clutch, just made a new video of it. Go check it out. Some of those animals will be available shortly. And I'd love for you to take care of them. All these sponsors take care of me and allow me to do this show and to focus on bringing this content to you like we're going to cover tonight. So thank you. Audience, thank you so much. USARK, Florida. They do so much for us. And why is there a Florida chapter of USARK Florida? Florida's sort of the bellwether, the canary in the coal mine, if you will. I got to meet Daniel Parker in person. I've met him a couple times at various shows around Florida. But he was very kind and got mixed up with a guitar project that I had that Eugene Bissett had bought. I believe Eugene is well, he's certainly a notorious breeder, but I believe he's also a board member of USARK. He bought at last year's Daytona auction a guitar that I had built. Used to be one of my touring guitars. And it turns out Daniel's an amazing guitarist and entertainer in his own right. And Eugene went to Daniel and said, hey, we got to get more money for this guitar. Why don't you work on a promo campaign for it? And Daniel and I crossed paths that way. He's been very good, very welcoming to me. Elizabeth, the president of USARK Florida, I don't know how she does it. Here's what I know of Elizabeth. We've met in person a couple times, and she's fantastic, and she does a whole lot for our industry. She also has a pet shop in Lakeland, I believe is where it is. I see her at every show. I mean, I do every show that I can, and she's there working every show. She's running a business, and she's the president of USARK Florida. So I'm really happy to have them both on. I'm probably not going to interject as much tonight. I'm going to let this conversation and show flow a little bit with them at the lead, but we're going to talk about the lawsuit. We're going to talk about the history of the lawsuit, how we got to where we're at, just what the lawsuit is from a layman's terms, what the ruling this week means, and what the future looks like and what the action plans are. So please welcome back Daniel Parker, and for the very first time, please welcome Elizabeth Wisneski to the Proper Royals stage. Good evening. How are y'all tonight?
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for taking time out of your schedules. I just alluded to it, but I know that you two are both very busy. It's a busy time. I don't know when it's not a busy time when it comes to laws and reptiles in Florida, but I know it's a busy time. So thanks for joining tonight. Why would you all, and Daniel, I apologize. What's your title with USARK? I know we see you. I know you're the face. What is the title? I feel so bad.
Well, you might be mistaken in calling me the face. I'm sure Elizabeth, she should definitely be the face. I'm the mouth, you know. So I'm the director of media. So you basically had it right, kind of a director of communications type thing. And okay. Elizabeth Wisneski is our esteemed president who's joining us tonight.
My apologies. I always think there's that W in there, and I don't know why. There is no W.
No, it's okay. Trust me. I'm just happy somebody's close to it.
We've heard worse. We have.
It's okay.
Okay. Well, my apologies. The intentions were good. I promise you. I will continue to work on it. So could you give us, we all hear, I hear of the lawsuit. I know there's a fight going on. I know it's expensive. I know USARK Florida needs our support, needs the national support. I know that Florida serves as a bellwether for the rest of the country as far as precedent that can be set. Can you give us the history that led to the lawsuit, and then what the lawsuit is? What was the challenge? What's the angle? What are we working towards here?
Dan, you want me to kick off, or do you want it?
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh, well, we're going to go all the way back when they started to talk about prohibiting species that were on a CSP list. And it started through a legislation through our last lawsuit, to be honest with you. This has been going on for years. It feels like decades at this point, but it's been years. And FWC went to legislation, and they started with, we're going to make it, through legislation, prohibiting these species. And they took away the CSP, and they tried to prohibit it through legislation. So we fought that, and we prevailed. We did prevail.
Can I interrupt? Tell us what the CSP is, please.
I'm sorry. We talk about it so much, and I've been going through it all day. It was a conditional species program, and basically the animals on this program are highly regulated. So basically, all the animals would have to be pit tagged. They all had caging requirements. All those caging requirements had locked. They all have to have, like I said, they were pit tagged. Not only are they pit tagged, if you had accusations, deaths, births, transfers, all had to be logged, and you would have to keep these records forever. I was a CSP permit holder. So from my very first Burmese python, she was pit tagged. When I got her, I had to record who I got her from. You were not allowed to sell them to anyone in the public. They would have to be for commercial use only. So this was a very cumbersome task for anybody that wished to have them. FWC has continually told us to this day the program did not work. We still don't understand why. So again, going back, we had to start lawsuit number 1, and we did prevail, knowing that they would probably try to go through their own protocols to prohibit these species. So it was everything from an anaconda to a Burmese to a reticulated python to a Nile monitor. These are the more popular ones that people had. Scrub pythons. These are things that people had. Again, they were not in regular trade. They were only in commercial trade. And that is something that's very important. So not the, I couldn't just go to you, Adam, and go, hey, Adam wants to come buy a Burmese python. You wouldn't be able to do that unless you had the appropriate permitting.
And that's different than the class 3 license that everybody talks about. That's above that. I've already got that. I would have to get another license, correct?
You would, and you would have to be approved of this. I mean, it wasn't an easy undertaking. I mean, the rules they were crazy. And, I love when FWC says, oh, well, you're just against rules. The ironic part of that is back in the day when this program was developed, industry worked with FWC and said, let's put these rules in place. We realized that not everybody should own a Burmese python. It was before my day, but a lot of the old timers came to the table and said, let's make these rules hard. Let's make them where not everybody could have them. Let's make them so we can protect the Florida wildlife and protect our environment, but yet let people still make a living and have the animals that they want to have and enjoy with rules and regulations. It's not a free-for-all. Free-for-alls don't work either. We understand that. We have to have rules, and every day we fight and say, we're not against rules and regulations. I promise you that. We understand more than anybody how important it is to have these rules in place. But it's almost mind-boggling when you sit here and go back and go, when they sit there and say, we don't want that, you don't want rules. We do, we want rules. But going back after that, we saw FWC starting to work on a process to prohibit these species and add tegus and iguanas to the prohibited list. So you went from, and this was our biggest argument, you went from a non-regulated animal. Adam, you've lived in Florida. Yep. You could own a tegu and iguana. You didn't need a permit. You didn't even need a class 3. You took an unregulated animal that a lot of people own. A lot of people own iguanas in the state of Florida.
A lot. I have family members that owned. I remember growing up, my aunt had a 6-foot iguana. I mean, we would go visit this thing. I say this pet. It was her pet that she had for 15, 20 years.
And they're like little puppy dogs. They just jump up on your lap and they hang out. They hang out in the house. They're part of the family. Yep. This is what they don't understand. So you took an unregulated animal that has never had regulation and you took it directly to a prohibited list. It doesn't even make logical sense. And what cracks me up about the whole thing too is that I've even told, the commission, the iguana, I'm a grandmother. The iguanas have been around longer than I've been in Florida, and I was born in Florida.
Yeah, they've been there.
You're keep talking about an invasive species. There's how many decades does something have to be a part of an environment to not be invasive anymore?
Yeah, can we go down that rabbit hole? Is there an agreed and Daniel and I've tripped over this before, both with Daniel, but even here in Minnesota, as I've moved here, I see the words. I'm sitting next to a boat ramp and there's a sign that has the words invasive species on it when it's talking about plants and things that could intrude into the lake.
It's talking about European milfoil and zebra mussels up there.
Correct.
Yeah, there is a specific definition of invasive species, and by my interpretation, iguanas don't even fall under this. An invasive species is a non-native species that is established that threatens the environment or threatens human safety and also threatens the economy. So it has to have a cost. So there are many established non-native species that their impact is negligible on all of those things. And in the case of iguanas, I think it's really a stretch to say that they're damaging to the environment. They mainly inhabit areas that are disturbed by human beings. So developed areas, they do sometimes eat non-native plants in those areas, but they're certainly not a threat to human health or safety. And we've seen some claims to the effect that they've cost money because they dig burrows. But in every case that we've examined, I think a bridge, an old bridge or water control structure that was already due to be refurbished or rebuilt, they said that iguanas could have contributed to structural damage to that in their burrows, but nothing really established. They've said things like they could be a threat to tree snails, but all the information we have is that occasionally tree snails are consumed that are living on plants. The iguanas are basically herbivores. They've said they could threaten burrowing owls because they share burrows with burrowing owls. But we know from scientific papers that burrowing owls are actually eating baby iguanas. And actually in Central and South America, burrowing owls share most of their range with iguanas. So, and also in Florida, the burrowing owls are invading iguana burrows and using those burrows just like they do with gopher tortoise burrows. So I don't think they've effectively established any kind of negative impact to burrowing owls.
I actually
so
I
you
have a
know,
lot of
considering
questions
something
about
like an iguana invasive that's been here 70 years and still is mainly just found in South Florida, in people's yards, on canal banks, artificial habitats, it's really a stretch.
I think so. I think as a community, we could be stronger about when we hear invasive species, asking people, is there a human effect? Is there an economic effect? And is there an ecological effect? Because it sounds like the boogeyman is what it sounds like, right? It sounds like there's going to be something that comes to get you. Okay, what's going to come?
And people in our community don't always even know that definition. There are some very popular YouTubers, some people I like very much, but they've done videos in Florida on quote unquote invasive species that aren't invasive. Just because something is non-native or established here does not make it invasive. So we should not just accept that term. A non-native species is not the same. You could even make an argument for certain things like chameleons. People are collecting those out of the wild and selling them. That's actually having some economic benefit, just like peacock bass are, which is a species that FWC introduced as a sport fish. Even though it eats
Right.
our native fish, it competes with largemouth bass. It helps them sell fishing licenses. So that could be considered invasive by a lot of definitions, but FWC puts them out there and spreads them around, and that's considered okay.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to get too lost on the invasive species topic, but I think we can all agree and understand and comprehend in this day and age, there's many ways for living organisms to get from one place to another. And short of shutting down things like trade, travel, communications, business, all of that. And as much as I hate to bring into account climate change, I don't hate to acknowledge it. I think it's very real and it's a very real concern. The fact is, climate change is going to be introducing new species to new areas, new growing seasons in agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't. What I dive into that because as an audience or as a message I want to convey, I think we should push back when something's automatically invasive and evil and the boogeyman. I think that we should have a conversation around it. And I think that those 3 points of economics, human impact, and ecological impact are important to bring up and to ask. You can push back by asking the questions. How has this affected those three things?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And by the way, just so you guys do know, Daniel does have well, go ahead, Daniel. Tell me about your background in biology. He's not just sitting here going, hey, by the way.
Still work as a biologist. I've worked for University of Central Florida, and currently work as an environmental consultant doing things like gopher tortoise surveys. So yeah, I do have some experience in biology, but also with journalism and music. So yeah, I bring a few things to the table, I hope.
He does. So when he starts talking about this, some people have said to me, how does Daniel know so much? I said, well, he does have a degree in it.
We've hired good people that are experts
in what they
do.
Yes.
While we have a break in the action, I went to the Minnesota Herpetological Society meeting Friday night. It's held at the University of Minnesota once a month. And I haven't yet, but I will join. I will support that. But what struck me, and this is just a brief commentary, but what struck me, the presenter that night was actually a biologist from the Department of Natural Resources. And many of the enthusiasts in the room were field biologists for the DNR. And I thought about, would that ever happen in Florida? And had I ever experienced that in Florida? And I don't want to paint as much as there is an us and them. I know that we have to work together, and we have to live in a world where FWC is creating our laws and does have that control. But I had not experienced that in Florida. Now, I will admit, I'm not very active in Florida herpetological societies, and this was a step that I decided to take here as a new start. Do you see that in Florida, or am I right that there's a stronger separation and partisanship, so to speak, there?
Well, I can honestly say, if you talk to the old timers, and I say old timers, people that have been around for decades, there was that rapport. There was that line of communication. Again, that's how the CSP program came about. Industry did work with FWC. Stakeholders were communicating. FWC was reaching out. It hasn't been until the last regime, which I'm not throwing the new colonel underneath the bus by any means. He is trying to open the doors to communication, but his predecessor, there was absolutely no communication at all. Right. It was my way or the highway. And in fact, the assistant executive director we were in a meeting with, we had a Zoom during all the COVID, we were in Zoom. And his exact words to me were, if it can live and breed in Florida, I don't want it here. And unfortunately, when your leadership believes that if it can live and breed in the state of Florida, they don't want it here, then everyone underneath is going to follow suit. And that is what we've definitely seen. So not trying to get off your topic, but at the same time, we do have a new executive director, and we are optimistic, but we're also very realistic of the future.
Yeah, and that topic of Minnesota, I'm good with letting be there, but it is what struck me. As far as the Florida,
Adam, if I could interject real quickly, though, there are biologists within FWC that are part of our community. Mm-hmm. We have some that even post on social media in favor of us sometimes. We have friends within the agency. Unfortunately, what we've seen, especially in the past 5 years, is those people aren't listened to anymore. And in fact, some of those are some of the most knowledgeable reptile people there. So, in fact, there was an FWC biologist, Kevin Engie, that spoke at Turtle Night at Daytona. Okay. He was one of the speakers on Friday night. He was very clear about saying, I have nothing to do with the regulations, and everybody kind of laughed in the room. But a lot of the biologists within FWC are kind of ashamed of the direction that the agency's gone in. And unfortunately, there's a small group of people at the top, especially in the Division of Habitat and Species, and also that they work closely with law enforcement, that are making a lot of these decisions and pushing rules that are detrimental to us.
So two thoughts, one very brief thought, the other one a little bit deeper. To a person, my interaction with FWC has actually been very positive. So as a breeder that was selling, that needed assistance to get my class 3 license, that needed to learn how to navigate the legalities of what I could do and what I couldn't do and how to stay legal, that experience was actually quite positive. The philosophical overarching structure is bothersome. And that leads to my second thought. I want to, if preemptively, if I have posed this thing correctly, I should apologize preemptively. But my understanding, when we talk about legislation coming from FWC, these are not, am I correct? These are not elected officials. There is not a House and Senate progression that leads to the governor's desk. These are dictated. Would that be how we put it? When we talk about these laws?
We should distinguish here between what is legislation and what is rulemaking. Legislation comes out of our legislature, which is made up of elected officials. So our state representatives and our state senators. So bills that they pass go to the governor's desk. So actually what FWC did the first time on these prohibited species regulations is they put a bill. They also lobby bills through the legislature. They put that into the legislature, wrote the language, but they got a sponsor that pushed it, and it was passed through the legislature and signed through the governor. Now, we won a lawsuit on that bill. But then after that, FWC went back again and passed the rules through the commission. And the FWC commission is made up of commissioners who are appointed by the governor. So some of them are appointed by the last governor, but they have 5-year terms. So most of these positions, unfortunately, the primary qualification for being on there is being a major political donor. And most of the people on there in recent years, or actually quite a long time, are developers. So that's the kind of people who are put on the Wildlife Conservation Commission in Florida, are developers who are big donors. A lot of them don't know anything about our businesses. They don't know anything about the animals that we deal with, but they do read newspaper articles that say, oh, pythons are taking over the Everglades, or iguanas are taking over people's yards. And so they respond to things like that politically. And a lot of times they're not scientists either. So they don't seem to understand the science behind all of this stuff. They just respond to the media. And I'm sure the governor puts pressure on them to pass certain things. But that's how the process works. So FWC staff creates rules, draft rules, and then the commissioners vote on them. So when the commissioners vote on them, then they become a final rule.
Thank you for the clarification. I just don't want to get lost on this, though, for a second. So there is a legislative process and legislation, and I appreciate that. But there's this rules process that is not elected officials, not voted on or represented or legislated by our own representative democracy.
Correct.
And then those are implemented. And so I get that there's a difference between a rule and a legislation, but in practical life for Adam at Repticon, these rules are laws. These are that it ends up being a de facto same thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, they can put you in jail over it, but one of the things that's scary is that on your licensing issues and stuff, if they reject your license and you ask for a hearing, you don't get like a hearing in real court in front of a judge. You get what's called an informal hearing, unless you're able to push the process here. And in that hearing, FWC attorneys and law enforcement will basically be the judge and jury. So there's no real due process there. So that's one of the scary things about it. Even people in the legislature, some of the state representatives and state senators' offices we've talked to, they've talked about how scary that is, that this branch of our government acts just totally independently from most of the judicial system and the legislative branch. They don't have much oversight.
There's nothing, I don't think, I feel like, this is me personally speaking, not representing our industry. To me, that feels like anti-American, and I'm not trying to stir up things or go down this path, but what we're based on is having a voice and having a representation. And dictated rules, whether we call them laws or anything else, dictated rules that affect us doesn't feel appropriate, especially when we know that these are appointed, as you said, Daniel, political donors, but certainly not experts in the field in which they're managing, is my opinion. I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth. No. But that's my feeling on it. And that conceptually and philosophically is that's at the problem.
Well, it definitely is. You're not wrong to call that un-American. It is not an American system. You don't have all the rights that you're supposed to have as a citizen of this country. So we're just relying on the goodwill of this agency when they're passing these rules and dealing with our licenses that we need to legally operate. We are relying on their good faith to give us due process. And that's one of the reasons why we had to have a lawsuit, was because they didn't give us proper due process.
And for these, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, you know, and if we want to get more into the specifics of the lawsuit, at the meeting where the prohibited species rules were passed, there were hundreds of people that signed up to speak. A very small percentage of those people actually got to speak. FWC moved people who were in favor of their rule they were proposing up in the queue. They let some of them speak longer than they should have been allowed to speak. They gave them one person, I think, from the National Park System. They gave over 6 minutes to speak. And in the meantime, a lot of our speakers weren't able to speak. This included our expert witness scientists, Rick Engelman. It included me. It included our legal advisor, you know, a lawyer. We were all in the queue and never got to speak that day. So did we get Zoom process? That's, you know, it doesn't feel like it.
We were by Zoom because it's 2020. So when he's talking about the queue, we were on a Zoom call. It wasn't an live in-person one like we're traditionally used to. So when he's talking about being in the queue, please understand that was an exception that day. And all of us were in the queue. I was in the queue. We had legal representation. We had an economist. We had our biologist. We had tons of people. And like he said, none of us got an opportunity. They have admitted during depositions that they staged certain people and gave them more time. That was one of the things. We keep talking about all this money we've spent, but we found out a tremendous amount of information. So during this call or this queue process was our commission meeting. And all the stakeholders are supposed to have a voice. You're supposed to have your 3 minutes. There was so many callers and they did not let us speak. Our voices were never heard. And even their lawyer said, well, how do we know they didn't just hire actors and actresses to call in? I mean, seriously? So because they didn't want to hear us.
Because we have a false flag operation going on here, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're paying all these people to call in, apparently, because we're rolling in it. So with that being said, that is what Daniel was pertaining to. They did let their experts, they let their biologists, they let their people that they knew would be negative to the rule speak, and never let the stakeholders speak. And again, going back and talking about rule and trying to give some clarification here, when there is a rule, there are protocols that FWC staff is supposed to follow before they present a rule to the commissioners. Meaning they're supposed to do economic studies. They're supposed to have, you know, biology reports and showing how it's affecting the environment. There's a ton that needs to be done. They're supposed to take stakeholder input. They're supposed to look at all these things. They have different reports for, you know, how much it's going to cost. And they're called certs, and, you know, golly gee, I'm tired tonight. The cost analysis to see how this is going to play out. None of that was done properly. And that's why this lawsuit was so important. It was crucial. We had to call them out. Their economic study, and this is from Kristen Summers, who was the head of Captive Wildlife at the time. I'm sure you've heard her name. She admitted during her deposition under oath that they used Google to do a Google search to do an economic study. They didn't use an economist. They didn't talk to stakeholders. They took none of that in. They thought Google was a good place to get their economic study from. Now, I'm sure you, Adam, believe that everything on Google is accurate, correct, sir?
That's right. You could Google me and learn all sorts of accurate information.
There you go. So apparently that's all we
that's
need.
Tongue in cheek, by the way. That's sarcasm. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I was just baffled. Where's the science? And this is what our argument was. They're going to affect so many people's lives. They're going to take the livelihoods away, the businesses away from so many people, and not even care, not even put the time into an accurate study. And that's what they presented to the commissioners, which are developers, but that's what they presented as a part of their proposal and said, it's not going to affect anything. They're minimal. They're going to be losing. Never mind the millions.
And so the crux of the lawsuit was this was an unfounded, unlegislated rulemaking that shouldn't apply because of these reasons of it being unfounded and the reasons that it was put into place. Is that correct?
Their protocols were not fine. Go ahead, Daniel.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, and they're just there. So there are two parts of the lawsuit. It's that they didn't give due process. So all these things they should have done an economic study. They didn't to start with, and then they were pressed into doing an economic study, and even then they never did an economic study on the impact of their final rule. So when the language of the rule was final, they didn't do an economic study on that. So when you use Google, they didn't rather than calling a single stakeholder, they didn't call the license holders and say, hey, if we pass this rule, how is this going to affect your livelihood? They did not do that. So, and then when it comes to the process of actually how the meeting was run and how you were able to speak, they didn't give due process as far as that goes. The other argument in the lawsuit is that FWC lacks the constitutional authority to even make these rules. The state constitution gives them authority over wild animal life. And the argument that we are making is that the animals that we have are not wild animals. Most of them have been bred for generations in captivity. In fact, a lot of them are morphs that it's very unlikely they would even be able to survive in the wild.
Quite literally not wild.
Yeah. And another point from there was kind of an interesting exchange in the depositions with the former FWC biologist Kristen Summers, kind of arguing about what is domesticated, but they didn't believe that any of our animals were domesticated. And that's one thing that their attorney said, Rhonda Parnell, at the hearing last week, is that Burmese pythons and Nile monitors and things like that are not domesticated. But she didn't really respond to well, what about an albino iguana? And something interesting that we heard Kristen Summers say at one of the tag meetings was she suggested that people shouldn't even be able to breed albino iguanas because that's somehow cruel, that it's inhumane to produce these albino animals that might not be capable of surviving in the wild. So in that way, she's almost acknowledging that this is a domestic animal. It's not a wild type animal. So, obviously these conflicts abound, and we've pointed this stuff out. But that's basically the summary of our lawsuit. Oh, did we want to talk, Elizabeth, about the iHeart radio?
Absolutely.
So another thing FWC did was, which is unprecedented for them, they actually did an iHeartRadio campaign targeting environmentalists and people who live in South Florida areas that might be affected by non-native species. So they picked an audience to market to and actually ran ads to encourage people. So they picked an audience that they thought would be sympathetic to their cause, and they tried to draw them in to comment. So they promoted it to people to try to get them to comment on the rule that they wanted to pass. And then at the hearing the other day, we heard FWC's attorney suggest that we could have hired, what's to stop USARK Florida from hiring 5,000 actors to join a meeting like this? So they practically accused us of hiring actors to speak on our side while they were actively marketing this stuff to people on their side. So it's hypocrisy all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for that music that came on. I was looking up something. I was doing a little bit of research mid-show. I apologize. That came on the back there. Sorry, I've got a little bit of a twitch from some comments in the audience here. Speaking personally, not as a representative of USARK Florida, look, Mad Bio Reptiles, I'm not sure what your angle is here or what you're searching for, but if you listen, the issue that we have is the way that we're represented, the way that rules or laws are inflicted on us. And imagine if we were talking about something other than reptiles and we were talking about daily freedoms, daily life, if we were talking about how we go through life and how police or law enforcement interacted with us and the way that FWC is interacting with our livelihood. I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm not going to dive any deeper, but you should listen to the
I'll dive deeper into Mad Bio Reptiles. This is
What's
a guy
going on
who
here? Yeah.
publicly calls himself anti-USARK, just to let you know.
Okay,
and he
here we
kind
go.
of trolls us. But I did go on a show with him, and we have spirited conversation. We disagree on some things, but he is a passionate herper, and we've actually hugged it out and stuff. But you can expect him to come on just about anything that I'm on to kind of troll the comments. So we love you, Chucky. It's good to see that you didn't miss this one. Thanks.
Yeah, how about some transparency if you're going to come with that sort of thing? Because this is a platform where I don't dive into drama. There's a reason USARK trusts me to come to this platform, is because I want to hear the facts. I want to learn. If Daniel has corrected me before, I've questioned Daniel before. And you talk about our industry. I don't think anybody wants to be regulated by being dictated to rather than represented. And, I'm going to leave it there and I'm not going to get sidetracked there. So that's the last that I'll address of it. And
it's okay, Adam. You're nice. You're supportive, but I go and talk to the people who aren't supportive too. And I've gone on the show with Chucky also. So, I don't mind it.
I don't think that he came with good intentions with his comments. I don't think he was clear with his intentions, and that bugs me. So I call it out when I see it. But I'm not going to get hung up on it because we've made this lawsuit. You've presented the foundations of the challenges. What was the ruling this week? Where do we stand right now? What's going on in this world that we're in right now?
Well, what happened last week was it's another step in the process. We filed our motion for summary judgment, and FWC filed what's called a reciprocal motion for summary judgment. And in this case, the judge granted their motion and denied our motion.
And I'm sorry, what does summary judgment mean? What is the difference between non-summary judgment? What would the alternative have been? What was the angle there?
Well, we don't have our lawyer on with us tonight, so I'm not going to, I can't address all the specifics of that, the legal terminology, but basically the motion for the summary judgment is kind of the chunk
The
of
synopsis
the
of the case.
That's our main issue, is what we put in the motion for summary judgment. So we're asking the judge to rule on that and order some corrective action if he agrees with us. Now, in this case, he didn't. And, that's unfortunate, but it's not over. This is something that we're going to keep fighting on, and we have to wait for it. What he did was he issued an oral ruling. He didn't give any explanation, and it wasn't really clear that he'd even read much of the evidence. He did ask some questions of our attorneys about things like newspaper articles that he'd read or newspaper stories that he'd read that weren't even part of the record evidence in the case. And our attorney pointed out that those weren't part of the record evidence. But, these folks are human beings just like everybody else, and they're influenced by what they see in the media. And, a lot of the stuff that's in the media is from press releases that FWC put out. They've been putting this stuff out for over a decade now. So that certainly has had an impact, and we're starting to fight back on that kind of thing. That's one of the things that I do for USARK Florida. But we have to wait. The judge will probably issue a written ruling, which is going to be, if he stays with this position, then we'll look at appellate issues at that time. That's going to be something that our legal team's going to have to review and take a look at.
Does that, okay, so, and I don't want to put words in somebody's mouth that's not here, so I won't name the names, but somebody told me about a year ago when I was asking about this, and they said to me, Adam, whatever ruling happens, the other person is going to appeal it. So this is going to go on. This takes a long time. This is a judicial process. So where does, and I think you alluded to that, but I'm not familiar with the terms. I think you said you're going to look into the appellate options. Is that the appeals? That
would be the appeal.
That I'm saying it, appeal, appellate sounds
right. Yeah. And again, I'm not an attorney, so I can't specifically address. It's not my area of expertise, but that is Elizabeth and I have both spoken with our lawyers, and that's our understanding at this time. Correct. So we're gonna keep fighting on. I mean, this isn't the end of this, but it's also a necessary step, because FWC has to know that if they don't treat us fairly, there's going to be a reaction from us. So we have to stand up for ourselves. If they're just able to roll over us, they're just going to continue to do this. We hope they won't. We hope that new leadership is going to bring about some kind of change. But unfortunately, even with the new executive director, we're seeing that a lot of the staff are still continuing on the path that they've been on. They just reintroduced a whitelist proposal, which is barely different than what we thought was over a few months ago. Right. And we know that Melissa Tucker from FWC said that the option 1 whitelist was staff preference. So even though the commissioners didn't vote for that back in May, they saw that the room was full of angry animal keepers, especially because of the Holy Thursday massacre. So they didn't vote on the whitelist at that time. And here we are months later. We had a tag meeting. It didn't come up there. It seemed like the whitelist was over. But then at the last tag meeting, there it is again. But we should expect that out of FWC staff, because they told us, Melissa Tucker told us, this was staff preference. So they're not just going to let that go because they have a boss or a new executive director. But at some point, the new executive director, Roger Young, if he really wants a change in direction, there's going to have to be an actual change in direction. And we're going to have to see it in policy and not just words. So far it's been words. He's been really nice, and Elizabeth can talk about conversations she's had with him. He's been good to deal with, but we have to see some action at some point.
Is there a path? Okay, so sorry, I'm sorry. That question would have taken us down a different way. Maybe we'll circle to that in a minute. So am I right that when it comes to appeals, a ruling is put on hold? Is that a fair, or is that the case in this situation? Is that what we can expect, that this ruling won't actually take effect as long as we're appealing? Is that correct, or am I misspeaking on that?
Well, with it's just an opportunity for other judges to review the same case.
Correct.
So, we got the opinion of one judge, and if we appeal, other judges are going to take a look at the same evidence and also at issues that that may have happened where this judge could have caused this judge to not rule in the right way. That's something that the lawyers are going to look at. I can't speak too much to that, but it's just an opportunity for more judges to look at it. But as it is now, the FWC rules were kind of the default position. I mean, they've been enforcing these rules for several years now, so nothing's really changed.
That really was the crux of my question. Is there an imminent change that we need to, is it a Chicken Little situation? Is the sky falling right now, or is this?
Well, not with the ruling, but what we need to be concerned with the change is actually what's coming out of the tag group meeting and this whitelist. So that, there is some very serious stuff happening, and based on what FWC staff introduced at the last meeting, it's a complicated 18-tier system basically, and the default the default position is of any species that they don't consider to be in commerce, and we don't even know how that's going to be defined. What is in commerce is going to be banned or prohibited. That is the default category for all species, is prohibited unless they say it is specifically allowed. So that is very concerning. And then also the list of species they want to evaluate. When they asked people on the tag what species needed to be looked at, the first thing one of the environmental advocates, Mike Kirkland from South Florida Water Management District, said was ball pythons. And he's also said that he doesn't believe that non-native species should be kept in Florida if they could possibly survive in Florida. So that's right away, the top species mentioned was ball pythons. So that should concern everybody. So that's something very real that's in process.
Yes.
And to go back, and I apologize, the sun is set. This is where I have Wi-Fi, so I'm sticking with it. I'm good. But if anybody's wondering why I look a little creepy, it's because I'm a little creepy right now.
It's kind of like Blair Witch Project.
It is, and I'm trying to figure out my lighting, and then I realized I talk with my hands and I create shadows. But anyway, for those, look, a couple terms came out really fast that speaking of creepy, those are scary. You talked about a whitelist. A whitelist would mean, and very layman's terms to somebody who's fairly new to this or fairly frightened by this as a relatively new keeper and breeder, a whitelist would be that everything starts as prohibited, and as they choose to approve it and how they choose to approve it, it then becomes allowed, and it goes on this whitelist. And we just know mathematically there's a large number of species. I won't say infinite, but a huge number of species. And the legislative, administrative, rulemaking process getting animals onto a whitelist is going to probably outlast any of us in this, any of our patients in this industry. That's my feeling on it. Am I presenting it in a fair way there?
Yeah, and we know that there are tens of thousands of species in trade, and we're not just talking about reptiles. This is not a reptile-specific rule. This would affect fish. This would affect mammals, invertebrates. The tag there's been an increased buzz about invertebrates on the tag. So all of you arachnid keepers out there and isopod keepers, all this kind of stuff is being considered. And so far, where whitelists have been tried, they have been miserable failures. Michigan tried to do a whitelist, and USARK National was involved in documenting the species in trade for that, along with the aquaculture industry, and they came up with tens of thousands of species, and then it just wasn't really enforceable. I mean, let's talk about law enforcement's ability to identify species. So we're asking law enforcement to, if they do it fairly, if they actually allow all species in commerce to be on this whitelist, which we don't really believe they're even going to do that, that's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of species. Can law enforcement identify all those correctly? I mean, we already know that they struggle with things like identifying boas and pythons, which are some of the most popular species.
Yeah.
You're 100% accurate.
So what they did in Michigan was the same legislator who sponsored the bill implementing the whitelist ended up submitting the bill to retract the whitelist.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. I did not know that. That's a helpful piece of information. Let me circle back to really dumb something down for myself or people that aren't as entrenched daily as you all are. From the definition you gave of a whitelist, something that's non-native to Florida that can breed here, would a house cat or a Doberman pinscher fall into that category by that definition?
Well, probably not, because FWC, it's not going to be enforced by FWC because they actually acknowledge those as domestic animals.
I see.
And they know they don't have power over domestic animals.
Okay.
So, in fact, you know, we all know that feral hogs, feral cats are some of the most damaging invasive species. Correct. But FWC is not really going to touch that as far as commerce in those species because it's considered agriculture. Now, we think we would be better regulated by our Department of Agriculture, which in Florida is Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. One thing FWC, sorry, I keep going back to this, but it's hard to ignore these things. FWC's attorney said in our hearing last week, well, FDAX doesn't do reptiles. FWC is the only agency that's equipped to handle regulation of reptiles. Not true. FDAX turtles and crocodilians are covered under aquaculture, and so are amphibians. So actually, most of our turtle breeders in Florida just have aquaculture certificates through FDAX. They don't even have to deal with FWC. Turtles are 88% of our reptile exports from Florida. So the vast majority of reptiles in Florida already are not regulated by FWC. They're regulated by FDAX. I mean, FWC might make an argument that they have some regulatory power in there, but FDAX is the lead agency as far as that goes. So, you know, we would argue that why not just give this other 12% of reptiles that we're exporting or that we're producing in this state to an agency that deals with farmers, because we are farmers and we are breeding captive animals just like a pig farmer or a chicken farmer or a cow farmer is.
Now, I've liked this argument, has intrigued me for a long time since I first heard it. Again, I won't say from who, because I don't want to misquote or misrepresent anybody's intentions, but I'll put mine. It was presented to me as a novel idea, but it's not a novel idea if it's already in existence. So hypothetically, an alligator farmer, who's commercially raising alligators for the multitudes of uses that people put alligator farming towards, that falls under the Department of Agriculture and not FWC? Or do you know, or does it vary person to person or breeder to breeder?
There is joint regulation. They would consider it joint regulation of crocodilians. So there is actually there's overlap there, and it's not without controversy also.
Okay.
Now we know a lot of turtle farmers don't deal with FWC at all. And same thing with amphibian farmers. A lot of the big frog producers, they just have aquaculture certificates, just like fish farmers. So crocodilians is kind of an overlapping area that FWC still pushes their regulation on that. But there's no reason why Department of Agriculture couldn't be regulating, other than the fact that they have to be given that power by the legislature. So we would need a bill or something to make that happen, and they would need to be funded. They can't do this stuff without money.
Sure.
But it certainly could happen, and FDAX is just such a better department to deal with. From I go to Animal Industry Technical Council meetings with FDACs where we sit there, and it's basically the equivalent of the tag, where reptile keepers have 2 representatives on there. Our representatives are Marcus Cantos from the Turtle Source, and then Eugene Bissett, who is a USARK Florida board member. And they sit on that board along with the cattle farmers, the chicken farmers, the goat farmers, and they're given an equal seat at the table. So those meetings and dealing with FDAC staff, it's such, I can't even put into words what a different atmosphere it is. They just come off with the attitude like you are allowed to exist, which unfortunately is not something we get. It seems like our existence is not respected, and it's always in question whenever we're dealing with FWC staff.
It's definitely a different ideology.
Elizabeth, what's your thought as the president of USARK? And I shouldn't even say that. As conversationally, what's the end game for the FWC here? And I get, and not if the end game is get rid of these reptiles in this industry, okay, I don't like it, but okay. But why is that the end game? Why is this purpose? Where is this mindset coming from? I mentioned earlier the collaborative mindset in Minnesota. Daniel, you just mentioned what I would describe as a more collaborative environment within the state of Florida in the department. I can't figure out what is the root cause here. Is this just polling numbers that somebody feels is going to help their cause? What's going on here?
I think it was previous leadership, and they've set their people in line with the same ideology. And we talked about it earlier. Their ideology is if it can live and breed in Florida, they didn't want it here. Now, what am I hopeful for? What am I optimistic for? I'm hoping that those lines of communication can be open. I hope that our new executive director, Roger Young, is a man of his word and does what he says he wants to do. And he says he wants to open that lines of communication, give stakeholders back a voice, and look to working together in the future. Now, words are cheap. I can say anything, you can say anything, Adam. And I told him the same thing. We need to see this action. We've had numerous conversations on the phone. I've spent 6 and 7 hours talking to him at Daytona. We've worked and started planting that seed. I took him in Daytona and I showed him different people in the state of Florida that their entire livelihood is focused on this. I introduced him to people that he's wiped out their livelihood and they're barely making it. I've introduced them to people that have been driven out of the state of Florida that are now living out of state because they couldn't have their animals anymore in the state. I said, you're going to see it today. You're willing to take the time, I'm going to introduce you. You're going to see a young couple that's starting out. This is their livelihood. They're fearful of their future staying in Florida because you could wipe it all out. There's a young college student that he has done nothing but wanting to raise animals his whole entire life. It's all he's had. It's been his dream. He's going to college. He's a business major and he breeds animals. I said, this is his future. This is the next generation. And he says, I want to see it. I want to help it. Talk is cheap. Seeing is believing. The problem is, and I agree with Daniel. We go back and Daniel can elaborate on this a little bit more because I know he talks to HSUS and, they have debates. But FWC has reached out to HSUS.
And I'm sorry, what's HSUS?
Humane Society.
Okay.
And they have worked together and collaborated together on research and projects. They've not done that with us. Now, what does HSUS want? They want to prohibit anyone from owning these animals. They do not believe that a snake could ever be a pet. They do not, and I've had arguments with them. You've got children. You've got people that have allergies. They have a lifestyle that maybe they can't have a dog. Maybe they can't have a cat. I know how needy my dog is.
Right.
They're an everyday care, but they need that at the end of the day. They love that animal, that pet. They can go pick up that snake. That snake's not going to bite them. You've had ball pythons. Kids pick them up, they put them around their neck. They're playing video games. They have their snake around their neck. I've seen kids put their snake around their neck and go ride their bike down the street. The snake's just hanging out with them. They like the warmth of their body. They're just fine. And these kids cannot have dogs and cats because they have allergies.
Yep.
They do make good pets. They're easy pets. For people that work like crazy hours like we do, they're great. I can go in and get one of my geckos out, one of my snakes out. They don't care if I don't talk to them all day. My dog would have a fit.
That's right.
So, it's a different thought process that they don't understand. But they're not collaborating with us. They're not collaborating with the stakeholders that have invested. And I've told them, do you know who your best allies are in the state of Florida to fix your issues? The industry.
The industry. That's right.
Industry.
And I cannot philosophically get over. I mean, I feel like this is old Boston Tea Party stuff. We're being regulated, but not represented. And I can't get my head around that from, I don't care if it was something that I philosophically agreed with or disagreed with. It shouldn't be that way. And obviously I philosophically agree with reptile keeping. That's my thing. But more importantly, it drives me bonkers. And I know I can't change it. While it's hot in my mind, Shannon brought up a great point. What resources and after a show like this, what are some things that the audience and people that are viewing the replay of this can take action on? What resources does USARK have? Are there form letters? Are there contact lists? What do you offer for us?
We will be putting that together. And you know, Adam, and I hate to say it, but financially help us, because I know what you're saying. I know people are going, my God, you've spent so much on the lawsuit. Think about this. What if we had never fought them on this? What if we have never stood our ground? Win or lose, they know we're going to fight them. They know that we're not going to let them walk all over us. We're not going to allow Google search to be an economic study and stand for it. We're not going to let them take the livelihoods away. If we did, so much more would be gone today. We've learned so much. We have so much to share with you guys, in which we can start sharing. I couldn't tell you, prior to the court date that they were using Google, that they're sitting here using iHeartRadio. We have learned so much. I have so much information to share that we can now start talking about. But they know now that we're not just going to sit down and be a coward and sit in the corner and let them take everything away from us. We have to fight, guys. We have to unite. We have to stick together. This battle, it's not over. We're not even halfway over yet.
Right.
The change is going to come hopefully with the new leadership. And if not, we're not going to let them get away with it. We're not letting them take our animals, our pets, because guys, whether you like it or not, these are people's pets. There is no different than taking someone's dog. And I've tried to explain this to the lawyers and some other people that maybe are not reptile people. People look at their reptiles. I love my reptiles. You mess with my reptiles, I'm telling you right now, you might mess with my dog, mess with my reptiles, you're not going to make it. Mama's going to come out. You will not mess with my animals. Go in my backyard and touch one of my tortoises, you aren't walking again.
Right.
I love my animals. They're my pets.
Well,
and they're taking that away.
Yeah, that's a courtesy extended to nearly, I will say nearly, I'm sure there's some other forms of pets that I'm not familiar with, but nearly every other pet and keeper, and as a standard cultural norm, that should be extended to us. And Elizabeth, you apologize for bringing it up, but I will not. I do think it takes funding. I do think I would ask everybody to consider supporting USARK, or at their next show, a USARK auction, or any way that you can support USARK. And something that occurred to me prior to tonight, look, we all want to have a voice and we all want to feel like we want to jump in. Let me think of an analogy of something I know nothing about. If I wanted to build a bridge over a river over there, and I was all for it, and I was gung-ho about it, and I wanted to jump in, at the end of the day, I'm not the one that should be building a bridge that cars should drive over. And why I say that is the funding for USARK allows USARK to get the best lawyers, to get the people that are experts in the analogy of building that bridge, but in representing us. As much as I want to fight, I can't be the person in the courtroom. I would be thrilled to be the person speaking at a meeting, but I might not even speak appropriately on our topic. It takes people like yourself, educated experts like Daniel, hired experts that are trained in law and presentation, and that all takes money. It shouldn't be binary. It shouldn't be one and not the other. It should be both. But that stuff takes money, and the fact is excellence requires money. And I think that we should, that would be my call to action. I don't know if that's comfortable to you, but that's certainly my feeling.
Well, if it continues the way it is, it's going to take a war chest, because we're not going to back down. And the only way to not back down is to keep fighting them. And it's not just with lawyers. We have an economic, again, tired. We have biologists. We have an economics major. We have all kinds of other things that we need to start focusing on. But we also, and this is what Daniel and I have been talking about, we're trying to also develop a plan to help the problem, which is going to take money. We're talking about, building a team to help getting the iguanas out of the wild, the tegus out of the wild. But when you're removing them, we need those people to be able to have housing requirements. That's not cheap. We would love to be able to help sponsor people and help get these animals out of the state, help ship them out of the state, help do all the things that need to be done that FWC keeps saying is an issue. FWC is only given a handful of people the permit to export the animals out of the state. There's less than 10. So we have to help these people. But FWC is like, oh, there's a problem, but we're not going to issue a permit. So those people are getting bombarded. I know that the handful of people that are helping, they're working around the clock. They're bombarded. We are trying to help them, and we need to support them also. I mean, there's conservation efforts that we need to be doing, but there's also environmental issues that we need to be doing. We need to be taking care of it at many different levels. And unfortunately, everything costs money. So we're just trying to, we sit down all the time. How can we help this person? How can we do this? How can we do that? How can we pay this? How can we get this research? How can we get this study? So there's a lot to it.
There is a lot to it. And there's it feels overwhelming from a stakeholder in USARK in the industry. It feels overwhelming. I'm sorry, just a second, Daniel. No problem. But the fact is, any business owner, any person in life has faced things that feel overwhelming. You take the first steps, you have a vision that you follow, and instead of sitting still saying it feels overwhelming, we take action, and action produces results, and those let us know that we're moving in the right direction. And sometimes the results don't go the way that we want, but at least we know what that outcome and what that factual situation is, rather than sitting in fear, feeling overwhelmed. So I would encourage people to contribute. And I still do think, I personally agree with Shannon's point here. I think that most, again, my opinion, not representing USARK, I think that most elections are won by who activates their base, not necessarily the majority of the populace. And if we can make our voice important to our local legislators that do start, we do have city ordinances, we have county laws, we have state influencers, and the people at the top do need the support of the base at the pyramid. So I think all of those things, we got to do something. We can't sit still, is my point in that little message. So however you guys can help in the audience, I think it's important that we jump in, and you've heard all the reasons why this is not properly representative, and it threatens our livelihood. And those two alone should be enough to activate us. I mean, I really believe that. Sorry, Daniel, I cut you off earlier.
Well, no, I would just to elaborate on the question or answer that, a call to action. Just like Elizabeth said, supporting, we don't like talking about money, but all organizations require money to operate. And let's talk about the organizations that want to shut us down. Humane Society United States, they bring in hundreds of millions of dollars per year. Center for Biological Diversity, they bring in tens of millions of dollars per year. These are organizations that endorse the prohibited species rules. These are the organizations that came and said no to captive breeding of diamondback terrapins, things that we've worked on. And I know that's not all these are specific issues that affect all keepers, but what does affect all keepers is that HSUS, Humane Society of the United States, has representatives on the tag that are actively promoting this whitelist stuff along in lockstep with FWC staff. So unfortunately, their ideologies seem to be in lockstep. So they have tons of little old ladies that they show, you know, sad ads of puppies and mistreated dogs and stuff, and they get tons of donations because people think they're helping their local animal shelter, and they're not. They're giving money to this lobbying organization that wants to shut down things like, you know, captive breeding of reptiles. So that's what we're up against. So if you're breeding reptiles, if you're making your living for this or making part of your living and you're not part of a professional organization that supports what you're doing, well, you know, it's questionable whether you even need to keep doing what you're doing. You got to be supporting the people who are helping to keep you in business. So join USARK Florida. If you are national, join USARK National. But if you're in Florida, you need to be a member of USARK Florida. It's on our website. If you Google USARK Florida or go to USARKFL.org, it's very easy to become a member, and it's not that expensive. But we do have calls to action at times. Right now, our current call to action is for residents of Florida, in particular. Our Senator Marco Rubio in the U.S. Senate is sponsoring a bill along with, I think it's at 6 co-sponsors in the House are sponsoring Lacey Act amendments that will create an import whitelist. They will make state transport of injurious species illegal, and it will give U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service the power to declare injurious species in an emergency capacity, basically overnight. So this former FWC biologist, Kristen Summers, that we've referenced several times tonight, she now works for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as an injurious species coordinator. Her opinion can be used to declare something like a ball python injurious, which would make it illegal to cross state lines. Correct. So right now, our current call to action is for people to contact Marco Rubio and the various House sponsors. We have, well, I'm not going to list them all out here, but if you're in Florida, somebody is sponsoring the bill that you are a constituent of. So go to USARK.org, the national organization, and they have contact forms for all of these. Also go to don'tblacklistpets.com, and you can sign a petition there. So these are specific things that you could do. We beat the Lacey Act amendments last year. They tried this last year. We had a national effort, and it worked. So that these things work. But you know, you kind of have to do it when you're called on. So you need to be there, boots on the ground, whenever we have a call to action, and that's what the call to action is right now.
And down below in the description, there's links to the USARK Florida website. There's also links to the USARK National website. And to circle way back to the question earlier, what resources are there? The USARK National site does have the form letters, does have the links to the national sponsors, in this case, Marco Rubio, but also Florida representatives that are sponsoring this act as well. And I don't want things to be all doom and gloom. As you mentioned, we did beat that legislation last year, and okay, power to the kudos to the tenacity of the opposition. They keep bringing it back up, but we have set precedent, a victorious precedent in the past. This stuff does work. Our voices do matter. This isn't just overwhelming doom and gloom, which I feel like I regret some of this turned into with me, posing the questions that I have. But this stuff,
you're in such dark conditions right now there, Adam. It's hard to not get doom and gloomy.
There's a Cat 4 coming across the river from me here. I need to get.
We're not sulking in doom and gloom, though.
days, you know?
We are not.
We're used to these tumultuous conditions. Elizabeth and I are battle hardened. So we're out here fighting for you all the time, and we are not going to sulk in gloom. We're fighting, and we're optimistic for the future. If we were just going to throw our hands up and give up, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
Well, I want to say thank you to both. We've already chewed up 90 minutes, which doesn't feel like it. But I want to say thank you. I want to tell you both again how thankful I am that you are willing to trust me in this platform and this audience. I hope we've positioned things as fairly as possible. I hope my little mid-show tantrum and sort of calling out something that I thought was unfair wasn't out of line. Yeah, buddy, look at that little parts caster.
Yeah, I just thought I better. This is my favorite parts caster, Adam. So I built this guitar myself from parts, and this is one of my favorite guitars.
It's a beauty. I'm not a Strat guy, but that could convince me to become one, I bet. I wouldn't turn it away, you know?
Yeah, it's got a light ash body, just like that Telly that you built. But I kind of made it, you know, it's got a humbucker in the bridge, so it can do rock, but it splits too. So I can play surf music. So,
This is how all of our families feel when we start talking about morphs, or you start talking about locality corn snakes.
Right.
I love the community. Thank you so much for what you guys do. I want to tell you also, if there's ever a platform that you want, if there's ever a call to action, if you want a 15-minute slot, the door is always open. I do 2 shows a week. You're welcome at either one of them, every one of them. And I want to see this succeed. There's no reason that we can't be collaboratively represented, just like every other industry in this world, not in this world, in this country, that we ask for and that we're promised. That's my feeling. Elizabeth, will you take us home? I give you the last word tonight, because I feel like Daniel and I yap a lot, and now we're talking about guitars, which we'll certainly talk about. Had I known, I would have had a call right here too.
We would be on another 90 minutes. We got guitar talk. I already know the two of you. Actually, it might be 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. But I just wanted to thank you, Adam, and thank you, everybody. I mean, your support it just touches our heart and keeps us going. We're not giving up. We really are not. We have the best interest of not only today's generation, but the generations to come. And guys, you know, I have people like go, oh my gosh, aren't you depressed? Isn't this too much? No, it's not. Look at our children. Look at our futures. Look at our pets. We love them all, and we're going to fight for them. We're not giving up, guys. It's just begun.
If it doesn't pose a conflict of interest for you, would you plug your family business and your store and tell us how we could support you as well?
I own Family Reptiles, and I actually also own a martial arts school.
Really?
So, yes, I do.
I did not know that.
I am all about education, and the next generation is so important to me. So yes, Family Reptiles here in Lakeland, Florida, and Family Martial Arts. So I have a lot of fun during the day between my kids and my animals. I'm a happy mommy.
The next time,
sometimes she even drives the bus.
I do.
Really?
I do.
Which bus? The one to the reptile shows?
I'll drive the rigs, but I have a CDL, so I'll drive a school bus to pick up the kids.
Wow. So next time people say, Adam, you work a lot, you do a lot, I'm going to go, yeah, but you haven't met Elizabeth just yet. There's more to it.
Yeah, we have a little fun.
All right. Well, I want to say thank you all so much. I enjoy these times. Let's do it again. Please, again, you're welcome anytime, together, individually, morning show, evening show, standing offer. I'll always make time for you both. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, guys. And hey, become a member of USARK or USARK Florida. If you're in Florida, make sure you support.
All right. On that, we are out of here. Stick tight for just a second, y'all.
Thank you.